For more on all of this now, I'm joined by Republican strategist Susan Del Percio and Democratic strategist Tara Dowdell. So, Tara, let me play for you a little bit more of what we heard from Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi this morning on Morning Joe about where she stands on whether President Biden should continue in this race. Watch. Okay, so we're still working on that sound, but let me just read it for you. Oh, here we go.
Does he have your support to be the head of the Democratic ticket?
As long as the president has it's up to the president to decide if he is going to run. We're all encouraging him to make that decision because time is running short.
He has said firmly this week he is going to run. Do you want him to run?
I want him to do whatever he decides to do.
So, Tara, you heard Jonathan sort of press her to try to give her an opportunity to make her position clear, and that wasn't a ringing endorsement. What do you make of that?
Well, it wasn't a ringing endorsement, but at the end of the day, Democrats are going to rally around Biden if he stays in this race. And right now, he said he's going to stay in the race. Yes, there are some nervous Democrats because there's some people running in some tough districts. But I can tell you, and I try not to make too many predictions, the Democratic base will stick with Joe Biden, just as the Republican base will stick with Donald Trump. And the Democratic base is energized by the fact that they think Donald Trump is dangerous and unfit. And that's what's going to drive that turnout for Democrats.
Susan, what's your sense of where independent voters are right now, or those disaffected Republicans who have been scared off from Trump? What do they make of all this? Is it pushing them away from President Biden? What do you think?
Well, those independents have been hesitant about Joe Biden since they voted for him in 2020. Now they're more concerned from what they see, as most of us are. And the question is do they vote for Joe Biden again in 2024, or do they stay home? Joe Biden needs every single vote he got in 2020. He won by thin margins. So those Republicans who will never vote for Trump but said, I'll vote for Biden in 2020, if they don't vote for Biden in 2020 again, that's a problem. And to Tara's point about the base being there for Biden, yes, but they're not enthusiastic. We see numbers of voter enthusiasm in the 60s for Joe Biden among his base, where it's in the high 70s for Donald Trump. So that shows you, again, the couch is the worst enemy for Joe Biden. I don't think anybody who voted, any Democrat who voted for Joe Biden in 2020 is voting for Donald Trump. But they may stay home.
But, Tara, we have seen progressives like Senator Bernie Sanders or Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez come out and defend Biden and throw their full support behind his candidacy. But it seems like it's more of the moderates or some of the centrist Democrats that have expressed concerns or have even said he should step aside from his campaign. Why is that?
I think it's because they're in tough races, right? So if you're in a safe district, you're less concerned. But I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is we talk about the enthusiasm gap, but we don't talk about the disdain gap. There are people who absolutely hate Donald Trump and would never vote for him. And we don't talk enough about that. Biden does not have that issue. He has people who are concerned about his age. And so he is, yes, going to have to convince people that he is okay. He's also going to have to remind people that you don't just vote for a president, you vote for an entire administration. You vote for policy choices. So he has some work to do, right? But at the same time, I think that there's other factors at play besides just the enthusiasm gap. There's that disdain gap that we don't talk enough about.
And we are hearing from Donald Trump again. It's been a while since he's been on the campaign trail. We've seen President Biden and his campaign really hit him for all the time he spent at golf courses. But he was rallying his supporters last night in Florida. And amid the speculation over his VP pick, the former president has recently been ramping up attacks on Biden's vice president, Kamala Harris. In fact, it was one of the first things he addressed at last night's rally. Watch.
He picked Kamala Harris as his vice president. No, it was brilliant because it was an insurance policy, maybe the best insurance policy I've ever seen, Marco. If Joe had picked someone even halfway competent, they would have bounced him from office years ago.
Susan, your reaction to that?
It's Donald Trump being Donald Trump. He's done worse. He'll say worse in the future. But again, what's concerning is that Nancy Pelosi's comments this morning are what's going to lead the news cycle instead of Donald Trump's rally. And that's the problem right now. As someone who is voting for Joe Biden in 2024, I am concerned about what happens down ballot. As Tara mentioned, those people who spoke out softly against the president, they are worried about their own races. But Nancy Pelosi, there's no one smarter or more dedicated to protecting a Democratic majority in the House of Representatives. And my guess is she's still playing this game because she knows that the only way, if Trump does win, the only stopgap against him is a Democratic House.
Real quickly, if you will, Tara, how much sway do you think Nancy Pelosi has? And given that she hasn't been more definitive, what's the impact of that?
I think Nancy Pelosi clearly has a lot of leverage within the party, a lot of respect and influence. But at the same time, the overwhelming majority of elected officials support Joe Biden and have come out publicly to do so, right, and have been very vociferous in that support. And the really ardent part of the base, another piece that gets ignored, is there's a very ardent part of the base that is absolutely out there, and they're calling and they're rallying, they're on Twitter and they're posting. Like, if I said something bad about Biden right now, I'd have a million messages,
I'm
right?
sure I do.
So the notion that there's no enthusiasm is not true. And really quickly on Kamala, Trump is clearly concerned about her. He wouldn't be mentioning her and attacking her if he didn't have concerns about her.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.